Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved brother Ranga. Today we continue in mind and supermind.
But what I propose to do today, we have had 3 chapters on life divine. So today we'll just look at all the salient points that he's saying about the supermind so that we have a clear idea about what he's saying.
Excellent.
Okay, because so actually it starts from the divine Maya, then the next chapter is the supermind as creator, then the next chapter is the supreme truth consciousness, then the triple status of supermind. So you can say almost 4 chapters on the supermind. So we'll finish that last para and then we'll have a quick review of what the supermind is. So let me go to
There are actually 3 paras to go.
Oh, I see.
Very good.
So we'll read the para first and then we'll come back. And also, Narada suggested that we go a little slow because sometimes we are not discussing too much. It's not always possible to discuss too much because if he is dealing with one subject, sometimes it goes on to 3 paras. So only 1 para if you read, you may not get the whole thing. But we'll go as far as possible in a systematic manner, sentence by sentence. So I'm reading this sentence first, this phrase, the para. It's a very long one. Okay. It is only when the veil is rent and the divided mind overpowered, silent and passive to the supramental action, that mind itself gets back to the truth of things. There we find a luminous mentality, reflective, obedient, and instrumental to the divine real idea. There we perceive what the world really is. We know in every way ourselves in others and as others, others as ourselves, and all as a universal and self-multiplied one. We lose the rigidly separate individual standpoint, which is the source of all limitation and error. Still, we perceive also that all that the ignorance of mind took for the truth was in fact truth, but truth deflected, mistaken, and falsely conceived. We still perceive the division, the individualizing, the atomic creation, but we know them and ourselves for what they and we really are. And so we perceive that the mind was really a subordinate action and instrumentation of the truth consciousness. So long as it is not separated in self-experience from the enveloping master consciousness and does not try to set up house for itself, so long as it serves passively as an instrumentation and does not attempt to possess for its own benefit, mind fulfills luminously its function, which is in the truth to hold forms apart from each other by a phenomenal, a purely formal delimitation of their activity, behind which the governing universality of the being remains conscious and untouched. It has to receive the truth of things and distribute it according to the unerring perception of a supreme and universal I and will. It has to uphold an individualization of active consciousness, delight, force, substance, which derives all its power, reality, and joy from an inalienable universality behind. It has to turn the multiplicity of the one into an apparent division by which relations are defined and held off against each other so as to meet again and join. It has to establish the delight of separation and contact in the midst of an eternal unity and intermissence. It has to enable the one to behave as if he were an individual dealing with other individuals, but always in his own unity. And this is what the world really is. The mind is the final operation of the apprehending truth consciousness which makes all this possible. And what we call the ignorance does not create a new thing, an absolute falsehood, but only misrepresents the truth. The ignorance is the mind separated in knowledge from its source of knowledge and giving a false rigidity and a mistaken appearance of opposition and conflict to the harmonious play of the Supreme Truth in its universal manifestation. The chapter is the mind and supermind, and he is pointing out the differences between the two and when the two can join. So he's talking about the veil is rent. So we go sentence by sentence.
It's actually very positive, isn't it?
Yes.
So positive. So mind has a place.
Very much.
And it's not above.
No.
Now he's speaking of on this plane.
Yes, yes. And when the veil is rent, it becomes subject to the influence of the supermind. In fact, everything has a place. Each thing that is there in creation has a very positive function at its own level. When you go to the next level, then you see the imperfections and the shortcomings of the lower one. But while you are in that lower level of consciousness, it has its purpose and its raison d'être.
So may I ask about fleas and cockroaches?
Yes, absolutely.
Their purpose?
Yes, everything has because we see sometimes in negative forms, but we come back to that again, the original idea that when the divine is creating, he has to create the whole range. That's a very important concept. He is not going to create only a small range. He is going to create the whole range. Infinity this side, infinity this side. So if you go to infinity this side, cockroaches and mosquitoes get involved in it. Not only that, they serve a purpose. Lizards eat the cockroaches. Okay? Lizards also eat the mosquitoes. Everything has got there's a food chain that is there. Those who talk about non-vegetarianism being wrong are not right. Because the entire existence has been made in such a way that it is a food chain. The higher always eats the lower.
It's a very interesting statement because years ago when I was in my teens, two yogis came to the US in New York, and one said something that I never forgot. He said, "It is the nature of life to exist upon life."
Yes.
It's written in the...
That's what we are going to see in the next chapter.
There's a phrase called eater, eating, being eaten.
Exactly.
It's very
Yes.
much there
Yes.
by the rishis.
That's in the life, next chapter.
Ah,
Not next. The eater eating, that's in the Upanishad also.
Sri Aurobindo said that in plants, the principle of life is more than in animals.
Yes,
But there is no mind there.
that's right. The intensity of life is more in plants.
So we're eating life,
Yes.
no matter what. We have to eat life.
When you come to the animal, the mind comes in. So the life reduces in importance. That's why the plant is more important than in plants, the life element is more important.
Yes, prominent.
But I think it's their dharma to give themselves for food. And I don't think it's the dharma of animals to.
So,
well, that's an interesting statement, she says. She feels it's the dharma of the plant to give itself. But she doesn't think that that's the case with animals.
So Mother has said that
Well.
plants are always in a state of prayer, which is not true for mind. Keep the jivas with mind. So
yeah.
But we also have the example of Mother talking about the snake and the rabbit in the cage. And the rabbit gives itself to the snake.
Yes. And the tiger and the deer.
Exactly.
This poem, Sri Aurobindo.
And what tiger will eat if the deer, he will stop eating.
No, but I don't think the deer gives itself. It is
Mother said
powered.
No, you read Sri poem, The Tiger and the Deer.
She says when the tiger catches, it feels the joy and gives it. Yes, she said that.
I don't think, not with the deer anyway. You read
There's
Sri
one
poem, The Tiger and the
I will
Deer.
like this.
I think you're familiar with that, Nara, isn't it? That poem?
This question Sri Aurobindo has dealt with in the Essays on the Gita also on 3 chapters. The necessity of war and this, the
Yes.
violence that you see, there is a purpose to it. Not only that, in the Katha Upanishad, it goes so far as to say that men, heroes, are nothing but the food of the gods. And death is the masala, what you call the seasoning. Death is the seasoning. It goes that far. So we see death and destruction in a wrong way, but there's nothing. There's constant construction and constant destruction. The two always go together.
But with Sri Aurobindo, he always says the opposite is also true.
Yes.
Always true. There's this beautiful poem by him, The Tiger and the Deer, in which in the end he says that a time will come when the tiger will not eat the deer or something like that. The deer will roam free.
Yeah.
The Christian idea of the lion laying down with the lamb. Yes. Well, we have a lot to go in this paragraph.
Yeah, a big para. More than a page. So, it is only when the veil is rent and the divided mind overpowered, silent and passive to the supramental action, that mind itself gets back to the truth of things. So, this veil is obviously the veil of the overmind, which covers the face of the truth. In the Ishopanishad also there is a very clear reference to it. Satyasya mukham apihitam, by this overmind veil. So, it's a golden lid. They speak about it as the golden lid. Hiranmayena patreni satyasya apihitam mukham. The truth, face of truth is hidden by the golden lid. And that's the one that Mother broke in 1956. We are going to have the centenary of that, not centenary, what is it? The anniversary. Next year, the leap year, so we'll have the anniversary on the 29th.
Now, I have a small question. I have a much earlier edition. And you have read silent and passive to the supramental action, and I have to a supramental action.
No, I also have A.
Oh, you do?
I read the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, it is only when the veil is rent and the divided mind overpowered, silent and passive to a supramental action, that mind itself gets back to the truth of things. The truth of things is obviously in the supermind. And before that, there is a divided mind. And when Sri Aurobindo is using mind in this way, he is including the whole range of mind. The upper layers of mind are higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind and overmind. Above overmind is the truth consciousness, the supermind. But below that is mind, and that is the one that divides. The division starts at the overmind level. And that is where the veil is there. And that veil, if it is rent, then you can have a glimpse of the supermind.
And he has truth, cap T.
Yes, the truth of things. That's why it's the supermind. He is referring to the supermind. In fact, the supermind, he uses 3-4 words. One is the truth consciousness. Another is the gnosis, Gnosis. So when he is speaking of that, he is meaning always the supramental consciousness. He doesn't like the word supermind because you can mistake it for something which is above the mind. But it's not something above the mind, it's very much above the mind. Nor is it the highest. The supermind is something in between.
And real idea? Does he use real?
The real idea is where the plan of everything that is going to be created is there. That's a real idea. You can call it the blueprint if you want. The blueprint before the thing is done, that's the real idea. And he uses the word real idea because it's absolutely real. At our case, when you have a blueprint, it may manifest, it may not manifest, but there it is real. So this sentence is okay. It's only when the veil is rent and the divided mind, note divided mind. And the overmind is a dividing mind, that which starts the division. The one starts becoming the multiplicity. Silent and passive to a supramental action. Note the word silent and passive. The mind has to be passive. But when you go into the supermind, it's not passive anymore. It becomes active. It has the power to act in the physical world without being subject to the imperfections of nature, without being subject to the three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. So that becomes active. To supramental action, that mind gets back to the truth of things. There we find a luminous mentality, reflective, obedient, and instrumental to the divine real idea. We must remember that much of what he wrote here at that time, he didn't make a tremendous difference in synthesis also between the overmind and the supermind. So when he is now saying the second sentence, starts making you think a little bit. When he is saying that there we find a luminous mentality, reflective, obedient and instrumental to the divine real idea. So when he is talking of the mentality which is reflective, he is talking of the higher mind. That's very clear. Because the higher mind reflects the truth.
Wow.
So it doesn't reach the truth, it only reflects, and it is obedient, he is saying, and instrumental to the divine real idea. Divine real idea is the supermind. So we have to change our idea, and even the truth TCAP, you start becoming, truth is relative. There's an incident with Raman Maharshi. So someone remarked about Raman Maharshi that he is not agreeing with your idea of ascent and descent, because Raman Maharshi had gone into the higher mind and he was stationed there. And his idea of the coming down to change human nature was not there so much in his view of things. So when it was told that Sri Aurobido's idea is there, that there's an ascent and a descent, he commented, where is the question of descent? The divine is there everywhere present. So where is the question of ascent and descent? So when this was pointed out to Sri Aurobido, and he said, well, it is true, but the questioner asked Sri Aurobido, but you said that he lives in the truth consciousness. So Sri Aurobido said, of course he lives in the truth consciousness, but I didn't say he lives in the absolute truth consciousness.
Oh.
So it depends. So truth consciousness, truth here, starts at the higher mind level.
So then TCAP, truth
Yes.
consciousness is not necessarily only supermind.
That's the thing. We have to be a little plastic in our understanding, but the word reflective and obedient to instrumental makes it very clear that he is talking of the higher mind. And so the veil that he is talking about is not the veil of the overmind, but the veil of thoughts. Our thoughts are the veil. If the thought cease, the veil is rent.
Correct. And they could be at any age.
Yes. Then you have the difference between our mind and the higher mind. The higher mind is reached when you stop thinking. There are no thoughts. Okay? It's the thoughts that the constant movement of thoughts itself is a barrier. If I do this, you can't see me very clearly. So any movement is a thought. Let me give you one quotation which he gave to Satyendra, which explains this also. He says, a veil behind the heart, a lid over the mind, divide us from the divine. Love and devotion rend the veil. In the
quietude of
In
the
the
mind.
quietude of the mind, the lid thins and vanishes.
Yes.
Now you can understand
So
what
that
he
was
said.
Satyendra. I
Yes,
thought it
that-
was Champakla.
No, Satyendra.
Ah, wonderful.
Something to learn. And
So,
memorize.
when the lid of the thoughts vanishes, and also
The veil.
your emotions. The emotions are constant movement. I like this, I don't like this. I like this, I don't like this. This movement itself is a barrier and a veil. So if you want to stop the veil here, don't have likes and dislikes. In other words, get rid of desire. So if you get rid of desire, there is no movement behind and you can go into the deeper part of the heart. Same thing with the mind. The mind is constantly moving. Stop moving. There is no veil then.
So no thoughts, no desire.
No thoughts and no veil. So you can go. And the difference between the normal mind and the higher mind, Sri Aurobido says the normal mind is like a candlelit room. You have to struggle to see things. We have to struggle even to see Sri Aurobido's.
Yes.
We have to understand. When you have a mathematical problem, you have to struggle. So it's like a candlelit room. But when you go into the higher mind, when the thoughts are stopped, it becomes like broad daylight. You don't have to struggle. You have to just see. Sight replaces thought.
Could this luminous mentality refer to the illumined mind?
Not illumined mind necessarily, but even higher mind. Illumined mind, of course, is illumined, but the light comes there like broad daylight, that is also light. So now it is clear what he's saying. When he's talking of the veil, he's talking of the veil of thoughts. He is not talking of the overmind. Because instrumental to the divine real idea is the supermind.
Yes.
So when you stop the thinking, your mind goes up and now you can receive the supramental influence. So he's talking at that level. Okay? So we go to the next sentence. There we perceive what the world really is. We know in every way ourselves in others and as others as ourselves, and all as the universal and self-multiplied one. So in the mind, you see division, multiplicity. As soon as your thought cease, you start seeing the oneness of things. So the oneness of things, he is pointing out in this way, we know in every way ourselves in others. So we find that everybody else is part of me. And others also, and as others, they are included in me and I am also included in them. The other one, others as ourselves, and all as a universal and self-multiplied one. It is one seeming to be many. So that's what you start seeing when you go into the higher mind level. Stop thinking, this is what you will see. Okay? We go to the next. And interesting, he's saying the universal and the self-multiplied one. It's oneness only, but it is multiplied itself. Okay. We lose that the rigidly separate individual standpoint, which is the source of all limitation and error. This is very clear. So long as you are in the normal mind and you are seeing multiplicity and you are not seeing the oneness of things, you are in ignorance. That's what he's saying. So the moment you stop your thinking, you start seeing the oneness, knowledge has begun to manifest in you, yet you are only seeing a reflection of the truth and not the truth itself. The truth itself, you have to go even higher up. That's why in our scriptures also, they speak of the mind as a mirror. The higher mind is a mirror which reflects the truth. It's just you're not seeing the truth itself, but you are seeing the image of the truth. Then, we lose that rigidly separate individual standpoint, which is the source of all limitation and error. Still, we perceive also that all that the ignorance of mind took for the truth was in fact truth, but truth deflected, mistaken, and falsely conceived. This is what he's saying is, when you go to the higher mind, sometimes you see the world as illusion. It is not an illusion. So they're saying it's not an illusion, but it's like I'm looking at myself in a distorted mirror. So the distorted image that I'm seeing is not false, but it is changed. It has become distorted. So what I am seeing is real, but distorted image.
Real, but distorted.
Yes. Distorted because I am not seeing the oneness. I am seeing you as only separate, whereas you are all one with everybody else. That I am not seeing. Then, we still perceive the division. So, when you are in the higher mind, you still perceive the division, the individualizing, the atomic creation, but we know them and ourselves for what they and we really are. It's not that you don't see the division. You see the division, but you see that that's only a subordinate aspect of the truth, and the oneness is more the fundamental aspect of the truth. You see the division, that's what he's saying. See? We still perceive the division, the individualizing, the atomic creation, but we know them and ourselves for what they and we really are. And what are we really? We are part of the whole. Like the waves that are part of the sea. You start seeing the sea more than the waves. That's what he's saying at the higher mind level. But but we know them, and so we perceive that the mind was really a subordinate action and instrumentation of the truth consciousness. Truth consciousness, he has put a T cap and he has put a C lowercase. By the way, the archives people tell us, and I think they are quite right, that Sri Aurobindo was not very consistent with his capitalization. So you can't take that as an absolute indication.
I have it capitalized on both in this
Okay.
in this
But
edition.
here they have gone back to the original and seen, because this is the latest edition, and they have put truth consciousness C cap, lower cap. C lowercase, not cap.
And
But-
it's probably because we are at the higher mind. We're talking about the higher mind, that's why.
As I said, don't be very rigid. Sometimes we have to
Yeah.
give a little leeway. So,
I asked that question extensively once to Richard, and it was about mother. Very often, mother is not cap
yeah.
in Savitri,
Yes.
and sometimes capitalized. World mother may not be capitalized totally. So, Sri Aurobindo didn't hold
Yeah.
rigidly to that.
Discipline is a very good aspect of truth, but also flexibility is also a very good aspect of truth.
This whole book was written in manuscript, do you know? It was handwritten by Sri Aurobindo.
Uh,
Actually, I know a bit about it because when Jyoti Priya sent me here, she put me under the wing of Prithvi Singh. And I understand that Prithvi Singh typed out the entire Life Divine, and he was legally blind, and he typed the whole thing out.
How?
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 Huge magnifying glass. Yeah.
But from Sri Aurobindo's handwritten manuscripts, is that it? And nothing was dictated in the Life Divine, right? Like it was to Nehru.
much of what in fact, there are a lot of variations. In the beginning, there are a lot of type. He used to use a typewriter. Then afterwards, towards the end, Savitri, we know he used to write by hand. And he used to do, his corrections were absolutely impossible to follow for laymen. He would write something in the margin and put an arrow here and things like that. So, and then lastly, he started dictating. So there are a lot of variations. We can't say exactly what, but the entire Arya was written, of course. Much of it is written by hand, but we have a facsimile of synthesis of yoga where he is typed. And on the typescript, he has again made handwritten corrections. So, exactly this portion, what he has done, we don't know. But they have gone back to the originals, and as far as possible, they have tried to stick to that final thing. Okay. So, yeah. And so we perceive that the mind, with an M cap now, was really a subordinate action and instrumentation of the truth consciousness. So when he is talking of the mind, he is talking of the whole range of mind. There is, at the lowest level is the physical mind, then we have the vital mind, then we have the pure mind, which is available to us. Up to the pure mind we have, that's logic and reason. When it's absolutely objective thinking, it is reason, R cap. That is available to us. Higher mind onwards is not usually available to normal man, but if you are a yogi and you have managed to make your mind silent, you can go into the higher mind. But that also is mind, included mind. Right up to the overmind is mind. Because even the overmind consciousness, there is division. So, that's what he's saying here. He's saying,
He uses the word instrumentation.
yes, it's an instrumentation of the truth consciousness. The overmind, intuitive mind, illumined mind, higher mind, all these minds are instruments for the supermind. They are degradations of the supermind and they reflect something of the truth of the supermind. So, so long as it is not separated in its self-experience from the enveloping master consciousness and does not try to set up house for itself, so long as it serves passively as an instrumentation and does not attempt to possess for its own benefit, mind fulfills luminously its function, which is in the truth to hold forms apart from each other by a phenomenal, a purely formal delimitation of their activity, behind which the governing universality of the being remains conscious and untouched. So mind must not try to become independent like our mind does. Intellectuals are always using their mind to understand things and think that that's it. That's a wrong use of the mind, he's saying. The mind should be passive. If the mind is passive, then it opens and receives the truth. And when it does that, it will see the oneness behind things, and it will be a faithful instrument of the real idea. If it tries to become independent and do its own thinking, then it distorts the truth. That's what he's saying. Mind fulfills, when it is passive, he says, mind fulfills luminously its function, which is in that, what is the function of to see the oneness and yet see the differentiation also. And see that the differentiation is only a particular action of the oneness. There is the background, the oneness is there, and in the forefront you have the divided forms.
So when he uses mind MCAP, what?
He includes the whole range.
The whole range.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, as we know, even the truth is relative. Even at the higher mind level, you see truth. But even up to the overmind level, there is ignorance. So Sri Aurobindo says overmind is the beginning of ignorance. Ignorance means seeing the multiplicity and not seeing the absolute truth. Now, he goes on to the next sentence. It has to receive the truth of things and distribute it according to the unerring perception of a supreme and universal I and will. Now, the universal I, E-Y-E, that would be because when you go into the higher planes of consciousness, you get what is called the witness consciousness. You are not judgmental. You're just watching and seeing the truth without judging. That's why he's using the word I. You're just watching. You're not drawing any conclusions. You're just watching. You are absolutely impartial. And if you are not impartial, then you are making judgments. So you have to be absolutely impartial and only watch. That's why he's using the word I and will. You were saying something?
Yeah. And does the universal I refer to the Ajneya chakra?
Yes, that opens also when you go to the higher mind level.
Right.
It starts opening. This is the eye of wisdom, yes. You start seeing subtle things and all that. There is a very interesting, since you have raised the question, Amal had an interesting letter to Sri Aurobindo. And he says that I was meditating and suddenly I could see in those days we had annas and pies. Now we have naya paisas, but in those days we used to have annas. Have you seen?
Yes.
You remember?
Yes.
Because you came in the 60s, early 60s. We had annas and pies, and that was about this much. Okay? So he says, I saw a glowing red, not red, I think it was white, a light like that, this circular light, which was about that size. So Sri Aurobindo says very clearly, it is the experience of the opening of the third eye. So you start seeing subtle things also when that happens. He was meditating and he could see that a small circle of white light. So long as the mind is passive, it does its proper work. And that proper work is to see the division in the background of the unity. But if it doesn't do that and starts jumping to conclusions, it will draw the wrong conclusions. In fact, he says that also about all spiritual experience also. He says when you are having an experience, don't try to understand it. then you'll be making a big mistake.
Mother wrote that to me
Yeah?
after my experience with Sri Aurobindo.
Huh.
Do not try to reconstruct it with the mind,
Yes,
or it will be false.
that's right.
Yeah.
Because the mind is always distorting things. Just look carefully.
Yes.
Afterwards, you can think about it, but while the experience is happening, don't mentalize. Exactly. So, it has to uphold an individualization of active consciousness, delight, force, substance. Now, this is another again, so you can see very clearly consciousness, chit, delight, ananda, force, chit shakti, substance is sat. Substance is, we must understand this clearly that everything, we speak of consciousness, we speak of force, but everything is substance in different grades. Matter is the most solid grade of, most dense grade of substance. But even consciousness is a substance. All these are substances. They become subtler and subtler and subtler and subtler. But everything is substance. You will see constantly, so here he has very clearly used the word substance. But often he doesn't use the word substance. He uses the word existence. But you have to understand existence to be substance. So, again he is referring back to Satchidananda. See, he is talking of consciousness, delight, force, substance, which derives all its power, reality and joy from an inalienable universality behind. So everything that the multiplicity is having, all of us also have consciousness, power, a little bit of power we have. We also have ananda. But all this is deriving from the background which is absolutely the truth consciousness. From that oneness it's coming into us and we are getting a little bit of it. A little bit of consciousness, a little bit of ananda and a little bit of power also. It has to turn the multiplicity of the one into an apparent division by which relations are defined and held off against each other so as to meet again and join. So the function of the mind is to make practical the oneness into a multiplicity, and again when it rises upwards, it becomes again, you start seeing the oneness. One becomes the many, and the many start going up again, becoming the one. That's what he's saying. For all practical purposes, if you don't see multiplicity, there won't be existence. There will be only one blank oneness. So, the manifestation implies multiplicity. The world implies multiplicity. Yeah, so then he says, it has to turn the multiplicity of the one into an apparent division by which relations are defined. If there's only oneness, there's a question of relation. There won't be any relations. There will be nobody else to talk to or interact with. So relations are defined and held off against each other so as to meet again and join. It has to establish the delight of separation and contact in the midst of an eternal unity and intermittence. Note the word, it has to establish the delight of separation. Separation also, if you are only one, can you have a relation of love or enjoyment with somebody else? You can't. So, multiplicity gives you the delight of separation. In fact, we come back to that famous story of you want to become sugar or you want to be sugar. Chini hota chao na chini khete chao. If you want to become sugar, then you are not enjoying the sweetness, logically. But if you want to taste sugar, you have to be separate from sugar.
But he says here, it has to turn the multiplicity. Then he says again, it has to establish. Then it has to enable. So the mind has to do all of these things.
Yes, by going up, by progressing.
Yes.
Because all these are minds. Higher mind, human mind, lower mind, all these are the mind. So it has to do that. It has to enable the one to behave as if he, with an H cap, were an individual dealing with other individuals, but always in his own unity. And this is what the world really is. So, the divine is creating multiplicity, but he is not creating multiplicity outside himself. He is creating it within himself. So, the one in the many in the one, we come back to that famous formula again. When you are in that consciousness, you see everybody within yourself, and you see yourself in everybody else also. The apprehending consciousness and the comprehending consciousness. So, it has to enable the one to behave as if he were an individual dealing with other individuals, but always in his own unity. And this is what the world really is. The mind is the final operation of the apprehending truth consciousness, which makes all this possible. And what we call the ignorance does not create a new thing, an absolute falsehood, but only misrepresents the truth. He is going back, he is answering the Mayavada theory, that when you make a mind silent, sometimes you do see the physical world as an illusion. You see that they are only outermost forms without any substance or without any reality. But it's not really like that. If from another angle, if you see, when you are in the cosmic consciousness, you don't see the physical world as unreal. You can see. Then we come back to a little bit of philosophy. When you make your mind silent and go to the self is the featureless consciousness of oneness and static condition. When you go there, two things are possible. You can see the physical world as unreal. You see them as only images on a screen, just like the cinema. But you can also have a cosmic consciousness in which you don't see the physical world as unreal and you see everything within yourself. Then they are not unreal. So both the things are possible. He mentions that in chapter number 2 or 3. He mentions that when you go to the self, two types of possibilities. The cosmic consciousness in which the world is not unreal, and the consciousness of the Mayavada where the world seems to be an illusion. Both are possible depending upon your individual nature.
So is it the immobile Brahman and the mobile?
Pardon?
The immobile Brahman, and that is the Mayavadins.
Yes.
And the other is the mobile, the cosmic.
Yes.
Mutable and immutable.
Yes, you can say that. That's right.
This line is so interesting to me. The mind is the final operation of the apprehending truth consciousness.
Yes. The apprehending truth consciousness is the one that makes the separation. And the comprehensive consciousness is the one that includes everything in itself. So it's the final operation, the mind is the final operation of the apprehending consciousness. The apprehending consciousness triple status of supermind.
Because without that, there is no mind at all.
Yes.
Without that final operation of the
multiplicity is not there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So multiplicity becomes possible by the mind's function is to cut and divide and make multiplicity. That is the function of mind. Yeah, and only misrepresents the truth. The ignorance is the mind separated in knowledge from its source of knowledge and giving a false rigidity and a mistaken appearance of opposition and conflict to the harmonious play of the supreme truth in its universal manifestation. So, it's very clear what he's saying. He's defining ignorance as seeing the many. When you see the many, you are in ignorance. But when you go to the higher mind, you see the many, but in the background of the oneness. So then you are already, the truth is beginning to dawn on you. The ignorance is the mind separated in knowledge from its source of knowledge and giving a false rigidity and mistaken appearance of opposition and conflict to the harmonious play of the supreme truth in its universal manifestation. So as soon as you stop thinking, the veil is rent and you start seeing multiplicity but in the background of oneness. That's what he's saying. The next sentence, the next para is not very big, we'll read it today. The fundamental error of the mind is then this fall from self-knowledge by which the individual soul conceives of its individuality as a separate fact instead of as a form of oneness, and makes itself the center of its own universe instead of knowing itself as one concentration of the universal. From that original error, all its particular ignorances and limitations are contingent results. For viewing the flux of things only as it flows upon and through itself, it makes a limitation of being, from which proceeds a limitation of consciousness and therefore of knowledge, a limitation of conscious force and will and therefore of power, a limitation of self-enjoyment and therefore of delight. It is conscious of things, knows them only as they present themselves to its individuality, and therefore it falls into an ignorance of the rest, and therefore into an erroneous conception even of that which it seems to know. For since all being is interdependent, the knowledge either of the whole or of the essence is necessary for the right knowledge of the part. Hence, there is an element of error in all human knowledge. Similarly, our will, ignorant of the rest of the all will, must fall into error of working and a greater or less degree of incapacity and impotence. The soul's self-delight and delight of things, ignoring the all bliss and by defect of will and knowledge unable to master its world, must fall into incapacity of possessive delight and therefore into suffering. Self-ignorance is therefore the root of all the perversity of our existence, and that perversity stands fortified in the self-limitation, the egoism, which is the form taken by that self-ignorance. What he's describing here is that one becomes the individual, and at the individualities rather, and that individuality there are three levels. One, there is perfect unity. Second, the individualities are starting to form. The usual image he gives is the sea, which is absolutely calm and no differentiation is there. Any 2 points in the sea is absolutely the same. That's the oneness. Then the waves start forming, and the waves are the individual forms that are coming. And in the second status, each wave knows that it is separate and yet it knows that it is part of the sea. And in the third one, the stress is more on the individuality rather than the sea. One more step and you come down to the overmind level, you are beginning to forget that you are part of the sea. You pay attention only to your own individual form. And by the time we come down here, totally the truth is lost, that we are actually a form of the oneness. That's what he's saying.
And can I just, when you say that it's the sea and it's completely, any 2 points are identical because the differentiation hasn't begun. So
Yes.
would that be the supermind level?
Yes.
And then the waves that is beginning to form, is that the overmental gnosis where...
Not overmental, but the second status of the supermind. We'll come to
second
that.
status of the supermind.
Yes.
And the third is when,
The individuality is more stressed than the
so
oneness.
that is when the overmind is.
Yes. The overmind is one step below the... These three steps that he's
That's the
talking about
third-
are in the
third
supermind
step.
itself.
Third status of the supermind.
Yeah.
Okay.
The supermind has three. Now, there is interesting, he says that supermind is not a Unitarian consciousness, because when we speak of the sea, any 2 points are the same, there are two possibilities. One is that it does not hold the potentiality of the many. That's a Unitarian consciousness.
It's like a cake which is not being...
But there is a uniformity holding the potentiality of the universal. That's a supermind. The Unitarian consciousness above, Satchidananda, where there is a oneness, but that oneness is blank, is empty of potentiality. That's it. That's why it can't come into manifestation. It's a supermind that creates the world.
But after Supermind, like Sachidananda will also manifest, or it won't
Satchidananda is not manifest.
not manifest.
It is the supermind that manifests it.
Manifest Sachidananda.
Yes, that's right. By splitting it, by separating it. Sat, Chit, Ananda. And Sat becomes 10,000 types of materials. Chit also becomes so many different types of consciousness. Ananda also becomes so many different types of consciousness.
So
Ananda.
like Sachidananda by nature is an unmanifest reality.
Huh.
Sachidananda by nature is an unmanifest
Yes.
reality.
By its own, you can use the word nature, but there's no nature there.
There's no nature in it, I mean.
Yes, that's right.
I'm thinking that the third status of supermind is when what it sees is true, but it's only focused on an individual thing. Like mother sometimes would ask questions about things. People would say, "Oh, mother, you have the all knowledge. You know how to do everything. But she was focusing on one thing, so she didn't see everything at that moment. She was focusing on it, because the whole point of triple supermind thing is that each level is truth consciousness, right? First, the undifferentiated oneness, then apprehending, you see separateness, but the oneness behind, and the third one, you're focused on that individuality, so you're not seeing the whole, perhaps.
I think at the supermental level, you can't say that it is not seeing the whole.
Yes, because even the
Yes.
third status
through
where
the
each
whole-
wave
Oh,
is
you said
there.
it's a focus on the individual, because there were times when mother seemed to not know things.
But that, I'm going to have to disagree a little here. I have two examples to share with you. One is a letter I wrote to Nolini about the situation in New York City at a particular point. And he said, Mother was wondering about that, and now she's so happy to have your letter to have it clarified. Well, Mother could have known all about that, and Sri Aurobindo at one point says, did she know about what Lloyd George had for breakfast?
Exactly.
That's what I mean. In other words,
You have to focus.
So,
But at every level, it's a truth consciousness. It's not distorted. It's
The
not
truth
polluted
consciousness which gets
by
distorted at the
desire
lower
or
levels.
impulse or anything like that. At every level, it's true.
Second example. Second example.
When you are in the Unitarian consciousness, if you are asked a specific question, you have to focus on it. See, it's like, that used to be my question when I was reading all this. I said, Sri Aurobindo says, if you know the divine, you know you have all knowledge. Then, could Sri Aurobindo have repaired my computer if it went wrong?
He could
It
have
is
been
possible,
able to-
but he'll have to focus intensely on it. And that focusing intensely is not worth the effort at that level. I like to give another example of this, like the astronaut. When he is, we have mentioned this before also. When you are at home in the morning, in the evening he has to sit in the rocket and go up into the space station. Okay? So he is sitting at home. What's he seeing? He is fully in multiplicity. He's seeing his children, he's seeing his TV, he's seeing his home, he's seeing the garden outside, he's having his breakfast, he knows what he's eating, he's seeing multiplicity solid. He's seeing only the details at this level. He goes to the space station, sits in and goes up. As he is going up, what's happening? First he sees his whole town. Then he sees the whole district. Then he sees entire United States. Then he goes up, he starts seeing the whole world. Now can he see his street? Now can he see his home? So there is a difference between the seeing of the oneness and seeing of the multiplicity, two different types of seeings. But if you are at that level, when you are at the lower level, you have to make a huge effort to see the oneness. But when you are in the consciousness of the oneness, you can focus, you have the capacity to focus and see the truth.
And also there is a physical seeing, and because you are at that level, then you have a spiritual side.
Yes.
By which you can do anything.
Yes.
But you don't have to do it.
You don't have to, exactly. It's not important enough. Now, for instance, as I told you, could mother have told me what's wrong with my computer and do it? But she will have to tell me where to look. Look there, you will find the defect. Then the one who knows the details will be able to repair it.
And Sri Aurobindo, in the midst of all that he was doing, Mother asked him to cure the cat who was bitten by the scorpion. So he cures it.
Yeah, you remember that incident? Very interesting.
Yeah.
That cat was bitten by the scorpion, and his eyes were going hazy, and mother said he's going to die. Brought him to Sri Aurobindo and put him,
Kiki can't die.
and in no time at all, it got up and started walking. Mother even speaks of flowers, faded flowers,
Yeah.
in the presence of Sri Aurobindo, they became fresh again. Okay, we stop here today.
Thank you, Ranga. A very enlightening evening. Thank you. Namaste.